okay, we're booking for dummies, but we do promos. We make sure that it's...
Did you hear that, people at home watching on YouTube? Man just called you dummies.
Well, fortunately, you're not voting, so...
Welcome to another edition of Fantasy Booking Warfare. Last week, Ollie Davis secured his place in our tournament final as Luke Owen and Team TNA couldn't quite cross the finish line. Now there is only one more semi-final match before our esteemed panel of judges can finally decide who is the least terrible booker of fantasy wrestling, as Tempest and Laurie Blake rewrite history and provide a more satisfying conclusion to the end of Asuka's streak.
I'm Dave Bradshaw, and for the past 15 years, I've been a play-by-play commentator in British and European wrestling.
Off the top, missile dropkick! Can he get it? Yes, he can! He's the champion of the world!
I am the master of the half crab, the current reigning undisputed British heavyweight champion, Michael Oku, and who better to tell you how bad things are booked than me?
I'm Nina Samuels, star of the Nina Samuels Show, and here on Wrestle Talk, because of course, Wrestle Talk needs more Nina.
Who is going to join Ollie Davis in the finals? This time it's going to be Tempest versus Laurie. The scenario they have been given is the ending of Asuka's streak.
This is a big one. This is things like this that are so prestigious. Streaks are so prestigious in wrestling. They have to end really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am very personally invested in this one because I am such a huge Asuka fan.
Let's see what Tempest would have done.
So some admin first. When Asuka debuted on the main roster, she sold too much. She shouldn't be selling for 3/4 of a match against Emma. So in my version of reality, main roster Asuka is the same as NXT Asuka. Mean, ass-kicking, doesn't give a if you are good or bad, and is dominant against 90% of competitors. Otherwise, things are largely the same leading up to WrestleMania 34 and Asuka's SmackDown Women's title match against Charlotte. Now, our story begins at WrestleMania 34 with Asuka beating Charlotte to win the title, like she should have done in real life, making her pass out in the Asuka lock. The night after WrestleMania, Asuka emerges with her title, and before I get into this promo, I will be booking all of this as if Asuka would be able to deliver these promos or something close enough to them to get a similar point across. Asuka takes the mic and says, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, no one has been ready for Asuka. I want the best in WWE. Come to SmackDown, try and beat me. You will fail. That same night, Ember Moon debuts on the main roster and later in the show crosses paths with Asuka backstage. Asuka smiles, shakes Ember's hand, and walks off, but the mood is tense. In the coming weeks, Charlotte Flair is granted a rematch for the title at Backlash, but it is clear that Asuka has become the focus of the division. There is a queue of contenders forming. The lower card wrestlers are anxious at the thought of facing her, while the top stars want to take on the challenge. Charlotte says in promos that she wasn't ready for Asuka at WrestleMania. She thought no one could go toe-to-toe with her on WWE's biggest stage, but clearly she underestimated Asuka, and that is not a mistake she will make again at Backlash. At Backlash, Asuka once again defeats Charlotte in another great match. Charlotte escapes the Asuka lock, rolling Asuka up for a near fall, but Asuka kicks out, nailing Charlotte with a kick to retain. Following Backlash, Asuka continues to be a dominant force on SmackDown. The general manager books insufferable heels to go one-on-one with Asuka, something that is met with the same level of dread as when Teddy Long booked people to go one-on-one with The Undertaker. Holla holla. The next person to step up to challenge Asuka is WrestleMania Battle Royal winner Becky Lynch, who gets a title match at Money in the Bank. No surprise, Asuka wins, this time with a cross arm breaker. Earlier on the show, the women's Money in the Bank contract is won by Ember Moon, who, when asked backstage if she would consider cashing in on Asuka tonight, simply says no, and when asked why not, says, I'm not ready. The following SmackDown, Asuka beats Lana handedly and quickly, and after the match, Sasha Banks confronts her, saying, you think you have faced the best that WWE has to offer? Well, you can never say you faced the best until you face me, and you damn sure won't be able to say you've beaten the boss when I take that title from you at Extreme Rules. At Extreme Rules, Asuka defends the title against Sasha Banks in a lumberjack match. Lumberjill match? I don't know. In this match, whenever Asuka gets sent to ringside, the Lumber people give her space, worried they'll be killed. When Sasha gets thrown out, Bayley fights off the others who try to stomp on her friend. Once again, Asuka gets the win with a strike sequence culminating in a brutal spinning back fist. Bayley helps Sasha to her feet, and the next week on SmackDown, Bayley comes to the ring and says so far, no one has been ready for Asuka because no one knows what she's capable of, but I do. They've always said I was the last of the 4 horsewomen, the last to get called up, the last to become champion, but at SummerSlam, I will do what none of the other horsewomen could. I will beat Asuka and become the new SmackDown Women's Champion. At SummerSlam, Asuka beats Bayley in the closest match she has had in WWE so far. Bayley counters all of Asuka's finishers and even hits the Bayley to belly for a near fall, but as Bayley sits up in disbelief, Asuka grabs hold of the Asuka lock and chokes Bayley out. That week on SmackDown, something is different. Asuka comes out not her smiling, charismatic self. She says, "That was the famous 4 horsewomen. I am not impressed. No one is ready for Asuka. No one is worthy of Asuka." Then, out comes the debuting Kairi Sane. They argue in Japanese before Asuka knocks her down with a spinning back fist and leaves. In the coming weeks, Kairi says that she doesn't know this Asuka. When she heard Asuka say no one was worthy of her, she couldn't believe it, and now she will not only beat Asuka, but she will remind Asuka of who she is and what she fights for. The match between them is set for Hell in a Cell. Asuka, now working as a heel, begins showing a level of complacency in her matches. She doesn't celebrate her wins, she knows she's going to win, and then she does. She wants someone to challenge her. Kairi does her best and tries to show respect to Asuka, but is shown none in return before she's beaten with Asuka's kick. From this point on, Asuka is shown to be even more dominant by the week, while also caring less and less. She demands challenges and beats all 3 members of the Riot Squad in a gauntlet match on SmackDown. At Super Showdown, the Aussie version, not the Saudi one, Asuka beats both Iconics in a triple threat match. She beats the veteran Natalya, the monster Nia Jax, all while completely unimpressed. This sets up her match at Evolution against Mickie James. James tells Asuka that she's not going to walk into Evolution, the beacon of how far women have come in this business, and walk out anything less than a champion. I've been disrespected before, but I am Mickie goddamn James, and I will not be disrespected by you. After the final of the Mae Young Classic, as Toni Storm has beaten Io Shirai and is presented with the trophy, Asuka's music hits and she walks down to the ring for her match, stepping on Toni's moment. Toni tries to be like, "Come on, Asuka, not cool, man," but Asuka nails her with a kick for trying to talk to her. Io Shirai and tournament semi-finalist Meiko Satomura come out and yell at Asuka as she just gets out of the ring. As Toni is helped away, Mickie James' music hits for her match with Asuka, and just like everyone that's come before her, Mickie fails and Asuka retains. The following week, Asuka makes her entrance when she is attacked by Toni Storm, who has to be held back by security. Toni gets taken to the back as Asuka says that Toni winning the tournament means maybe she can pose a challenge. Toni says she knows she's young, but she is the Mae Young Classic winner for a reason, and Asuka has lit a fire under her ass. At Survivor Series, she's going to beat Asuka and become SmackDown Women's Champion. At the show, Toni puts up a good fight, but is ultimately overwhelmed by Asuka's viciousness. Asuka grows irritated, having thought that Toni might be the one to push her to her limits, but submits her with a cross-arm breaker, and after the match, stomps on her head, prompting Io and Meiko to run in. On TV, Meiko tells Asuka in a sit-down interview that there's no need to disrespect her peers, but Asuka says the WWE roster is not deserving of her respect. Meiko, Joshi legend, asks if that includes her, and Asuka says yes and leaves. A match is made between them for TLC, and in an incredible battle, Asuka wins with her kick. After the match, Meiko offers a handshake to Asuka, but Asuka reaches out and hits a spinning back fist instead. This time, Io's music hits and she walks to the ring and just stands face to face with Asuka. No emotion. On SmackDown, a contract signing is announced for the Royal Rumble as Asuka will put her title on the line against Io. Io says she doesn't care if Asuka disrespects her, because when this is over, all anyone will ever say about Asuka is that she's the one that lost to Io Shirai. Asuka in response says, "Do it! Beat me! All I've ever wanted this last year is for one of you to offer me a challenge. I want you to beat me, but still, not a single one of you is ready for Asuka." At the Royal Rumble, Asuka faces Io in what would be the best match of her reign so far. Both exhausted, they both grab each other by the hair and shout at each other before Asuka hits a spinning back fist, knocking Io to her knees, and then a kick to put Io out. Asuka wins again. No facial expression. The following week on SmackDown, the women's roster argue backstage about who deserves another shot at Asuka. Well, later in the ring, Asuka says, "I've beaten you all. I'll beat you again." A brawl breaks out, and it is announced that Asuka will defend her title inside the Elimination Chamber as Kairi Sane, Charlotte, Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and Bayley qualify later in the night. At the event, Asuka enters the chamber 5th and eliminates the field. Charlotte first with the Asuka lock, Becky with the cross arm breaker, Sasha with a spinning back fist, and Bayley with the Asuka lock, leaving only Kairi to enter 6th and have a great final sprint before being pinned with a kick. Asuka, still your champion. The next night on Raw, the show opens with Asuka in the ring. Before she can speak, the music of Ember Moon hits. She gets in the ring, looks up at the WrestleMania 35 sign, holds up her Money in the Bank briefcase, raises the mic to her mouth, and simply says, "I'm ready." For the previous 9 months, Moon had been working her way up the roster, was the sole survivor of her team at Survivor Series, and defeated Io Shirai at Elimination Chamber as her final personal test before WrestleMania. In a solo interview, Ember Moon explains that she never got closure in NXT. Even when she was NXT Women's Champion, she only won that title because Asuka relinquished it. For nearly 2 years, she has stayed awake every night thinking about Orlando and Brooklyn and the mistakes that cost her everything. Asuka interrupts the interview and tells Ember she wasn't ready for Asuka then, she isn't ready for Asuka now. To her, Asuka has always been her greatest rival, but to Asuka, Ember is just number 32 and 34, referencing Ember being Asuka's 32nd and 34th wins in NXT. At WrestleMania, Asuka comes out dressed as Kana, but starts the match nonchalant, while Ember is collected and confident. They have a Mania classic. Ember kicks out of the back fist and then the kick, escapes the cross arm breaker, and hits an eclipse for a near fall, but as she sits up, Asuka locks in the Asuka lock. Ember rolls through into a pin, but then locks in an Asuka lock of her own as Asuka fights to get to the ropes. Asuka fires up, beckoning to Ember to bring it on, which she does, engaging in a strike exchange that batters Ember. Asuka nods in approval and then hits the kick again, but Ember kicks out, and this time Asuka is shocked. She goes for the kick again, but Ember ducks, rolls Asuka through, and hits a kick of her own, falling into the corner as she climbs and hits another eclipse for the 1, 2, 3. Asuka is pinned, and as Ember leaps to her feet in celebration, the camera focuses on Asuka, semi-conscious, with a giant smile on her face. As she comes to, she gets to a knee, mic in hand, and simply says, "You were ready for Asuka."
All right, so a year-long story arc presented by Tempest there for Asuka. Nina, let's start with you, because I know, as you said, you're personally invested in this one. Were you pleased with what Tempest delivered?
Yeah, the whole way the story was unfolded, fairly soon in, I could tell that it was going to be Ember. So I don't know if that was foreshadowed a bit too much, but maybe in hindsight, if I was just watching it as I went along, I would be enjoying it in that way. And to be honest, Asuka and Ember's chemistry was always incredible. It will mean that much more for someone like an Ember Moon that it would have done for one of the Four Horsewomen, who already naturally, by calling themselves the Four Horsewomen, have a certain level of accolade to them.
I have to agree. We're looking for the logic, and it's super duper logical. There are a few things that maybe I can point out, but the fact that it was a year long, and it's a good thing if you kind of know where it's going. Like, all these challenges are happening and Tempest is talking about them, and then Ember Moon just comes out. I know she won the Money in the Bank, but he did then explain what she was doing in the meantime by picking up big wins and being the sole survivor at Survivor Series. So he made sure that she was being built up and kept strong, as they say.
One thing that I worry about a little bit was after the heel turn for Asuka, how he says that she doesn't celebrate victories. If Asuka has no celebration, is that casual about beating everyone, where does that leave everyone else after that? Because, you've still got an entire rest of a women's division to try and build, and does it bury everyone else?
Once it gets to a point that you're booking someone as strongly as we're booking Asuka here, it feels almost inevitable that the only stage big enough to end that then becomes WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And so it's like, are those results somewhat predictable, inevitable?
At the end of the day, this happened over the course of a year, and there weren't really that many interactions with them. To be honest, listening to all the women that she was up against, Mako, Mickey, Sasha, I just want to watch all of those matches.
Yeah, great matches in there.
Some of them weren't built up, I don't think, in terms of as good challenges. There were explanations for a few by winning like the Mae Young Classic and things like that. Kyrie debuted in his thing and immediately just got a back fist. And that's like, imagine hearing that, like you're gonna debut, what's gonna happen? You're gonna get laid out. Ooh. You think about money, you think about business. Would people be more intrigued to see Asuka versus Ember Moon or Asuka versus Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania? That's
I hadn't thought about that. That is a massive omission. Oh, we're gonna have to grill him about that.
Laurie, I think, has got a job on his hands to try and beat that. Let's see how Laurie would book the end of Asuka's streak.
Oh, this is a fun one, isn't it? It's a fun one, but you've set a little trap, haven't you? You set a little trap because as much as it sucks what happened at the end of Asuka's streak and all that ending, you mess around with things too much and suddenly you don't have Becky Lynch the man. This is the problem with time travel. You go back to fix one thing and who knows what else you might up. Just ask Donald Gleason in About Time. All he wanted to do was get in Rachel McAdams' pants. He didn't ask for the grandfather paradoxes. He didn't ask for it. I mean, Doctor Who might have been a better reference there. But we can't go back and fix it. But what we can fix is Asuka's streak. So we're starting at the first ever Women's Royal Rumble in 2018, which I mostly don't have a problem with. Besides, of course, the dead-ass crowd, the crap commentary, and the Bellas being in the Final Four. So instead we get down to a new Final Four of Asuka, Sasha Banks, who has gone the distance from number one, the dominant Nia Jax, and Ember Moon, still sporting a bandaged arm from her NXT Women's title match the night before. Now the three smaller women spend some time bouncing off of Jax before attacking as a team, and they get her off balance and they start to push her over the ropes. But even with all three working together, they struggle until Moon starts to use her injured arm, giving her the last bit of strength needed to send Jax tumbling to the outside. Banks collapses exhausted. Moon is clutching her arm and Asuka swoops in, locking in an arm bar as Moon flails around. Commentary notes how Asuka is a seasoned vet who won't let a weakness go unchecked. She's a shark who smells blood. Moon almost passes out from the pain, and just as she does, Asuka gets up and whips her out over the top rope. Banks then comes back in and the two brawl over the ropes onto the apron, trading blows until Asuka blocks a right, pops Asuka up into the falling knee strike, and she spills to the outside. Asuka's going a mania, baby. Then of course we're back on the regular course of history until WrestleMania 34. Just a minor change to the timeline, nothing to worry about. What's that? Wales is underwater now. What are you going to do? Anyhow, Asuka versus Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania is a great match, just like the one in real life. The two trade blows, technical maneuvers, and hit all of the crazy offense. Top rope, Spanish fly, suplex to the mats, the whole 9 yards. But this time, as Chaz locks in the figure 8 one-handed, still working the arm injury established early in the match. Asuka manages to shift her weight towards Charlotte, who buckles, arm given out and dropping seemingly onto the top of her head. Asuka then uses this momentary distraction to whip round and lock in an armbar on the injured Charlotte, disorientated and woozy, who has no choice but to tap out. Asuka is your new SmackDown Women's Champion. Now on the following SmackDown, Asuka comes out to celebrate and says that at Mania she showed that she bows to no one and proved that nobody is ready for Asuka. But now it's time for everyone to see that Asuka, the SmackDown Women's Champion, is ready for anyone. So she puts out an open challenge for contenders at Backlash. And who should cut in the line but Sasha Banks, saying that she lost out on her WrestleMania moment thanks to Asuka, but she'll make do with taking the title off her. Now the Banks program runs through Backlash and Money in the Bank, mostly because of the promo opportunities of Banks saying at Money in the Bank she was going to do. It doesn't matter. After the first match, Sasha cements a heel turn by attacking Asuka during a post-match handshake and beating her down. Then a fired up Asuka sets up the second match for Money in the Bank to get her revenge, which she does, forcing Banks to tap to the Asuka lock and taking great relish in holding on just that little bit longer. Now meanwhile, down in NXT, a very banged up Ember Moon has lost the NXT Women's Championship to Shayna Baszler, who capitalized on that injured arm from the Rumble. Moon then debuts on SmackDown a few weeks after that and goes on something of a hot streak, netting wins over the likes of Ruby Riott, Carmella, and Naomi. Asuka then has a rematch with Charlotte at Extreme Rules, this time with weapons. Asuka manages to come out on top, but not without some serious damage being done to her upper back and neck. For SummerSlam, we have Bayley lined up, who was freshly turned heel and aligned herself with Sasha Banks and is out for some revenge, saying she hasn't forgotten how she lost the NXT Women's Women's Championship, and Asuka might be focused on tomorrow, but get too focused on it, and you won't see the past sneaking up on you. So the SummerSlam match feels pretty big time as the Empress of Tomorrow takes on the Karen of I'd like to speak to the manager with Banks in her corner. Bayley is at an obvious disadvantage against the overwhelming offense of Asuka, but the heels pull every trick in the book in order to tip the scales, including a rose plant onto the title belt while the referee is down. But almost on instinct alone, Asuka kicks out, fighting for her championship. And she manages to power up and win, locking Bayley deep into an Asuka lock, much like she did at TakeOver, with that sort of whipping around and to the floor and then holding it really long. After SummerSlam, it is announced that Asuka has injured her collarbone again and will be out for the foreseeable, having to relinquish her title. It's a little bit of history repeating itself, as this is what happened in NXT, but it mostly means that we can still have Becky versus Charlotte, last woman standing for the SmackDown Women's title at Evolution, and the whole pre-Survivor Series brawl, bloodied nose, concussion, and overall overness of Lynch, who's going to win the SmackDown Women's title at Evolution, and then do the whole Ronda Rousey thing. Because why would we write that out of history? That would be madness. Also at Evolution, we get Ember Moon versus Nia Jax, a feud which has been brewing for a while, built on their history during the Rumble. And at the pay-per-view, Ember digs down deep and conquers Nia in a gutsy performance that really puts her on the map. Then Asuka returns for TLC and joins the feud between Charlotte and Becky for the SmackDown title, so the TLC match that happened in real life is back on. And just like in real life, Ronda Rousey interferes, shoving the ladder over with Charlotte and Becky on it and giving Asuka the opportunity to reclaim her title just in time for Mania season. So the second ever Women's Royal Rumble rolls around, and who should be first in but plucky old Ember Moon, who was dominant in the early stages until a ghost from her past enters at number 5, Shayna Baszler. The pair brawl and Baszler gets the upper hand, grinding Moon to the mat and giving her that gum shield grin as she says, I bet you're glad to be in this match again, though you're missing something from last year, before doing her arm break stomp spot. Moon screams in pain and rolls around the ring. Despite all of that though, Moon manages to last until late in the match, managing to just about stay out of the way of a dominant Baszler, who has plenty of other people to terrorize. Now the final 3 is Becky Lynch, Shayna Baszler, and Ember Moon. Becky Lynch coming in at like 28 once again. Both Lynch and Moon are struggling with Baszler's MMA-inspired offense. A little blast from the past for Moon, and a little taste of the future for her upcoming match with Rousey for Lynch. Not that we've established the match with Rousey yet. It's happening soon. Because Lynch does manage to win here, she capitalizes on Baszler eliminating Moon because Moon hangs on to Shayna, which gives Lynch the chance to tip her out at the same time. Lynch gives it the big old pointies and challenges Ronda for the Raw Women's title at Mania. And no, we are not doing Becky 2 belts because it almost killed the division. It stifled the division. We are doing Becky versus Ronda though, no Charlotte. On SmackDown, a distraught Moon cuts a promo saying that she was desperate to win the Rumble because she is desperate to face Asuka again. Because Moon is the one who took Asuka to the absolute limit in NXT and she came up short. But she's been growing, she's been fighting, she's been working, and now she's ready for Asuka because she's a full moon. She doesn't say that bit. That's just me adding that in for. Please don't mark her down for that. She didn't say that. That was me. But she does say she's got one more chance at a shot at Mania, and that is qualify for the Elimination Chamber, which she does in a great little match with Naomi. Because, why not? Meanwhile though, Shayna also qualifies for the match, squashing Carmella in 5 seconds flat. Something she's done to every opponent she has had on SmackDown since the Rumble. And Shayna says that Ember was too weak to beat Asuka before, and now she's too weak to even have the chance to face her. Because Embers are what you call it when a fire is dying, and Baszler is here to finally snuff it out. The Elimination Chamber match plays out a lot like the one from 2020, just, a bit tighter. Baszler comes in and she demolishes Ruby Riott, Sarah Logan and Natalya before prowling around the center of the ring waiting for the final 2 pods to open, which they do way quicker than in the real match. Have you watched that recently? She's walking around for flipping ages. Now the first spills Liv Morgan out into the chamber, who ends up being choked out right in front of Ember Moon's pod. Moon's arm is taped and she looks nervous as a gloating Baszler waits outside the pod. When it finally opens, Moon fires up recklessly, assaulting Baszler and taking her by surprise, and the pair trade straight offense back and forth, but Shayna eventually gets the upper hand and spends a few good minutes torturing Moon. She slams her into the cage, and finally she slams the pod door into her injured arm over and over again. Baszler then drags Moon to the corner and sets up for the hanging Kirifuda clutch, just like she did to Liv. But in a last-ditch effort, Moon manages to pull her into a sort of snapmare and then climbs up the turnbuckle and hits the Eclipse one-armed for the 1, 2, 3. Ember has booked her ticket to WrestleMania. So that means for WrestleMania 35, you've got Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey for the Raw title, and you've got Asuka versus Ember Moon for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Now, during the match, Asuka is confident, maybe even cocky, because she's not only on top of her game, she's against an opponent who has a bit of a nagging injury, though it has had 2 months to heal up by this point. It is not the focus of this match, but Ember won't give up. She digs down deep at every single point, and she reminds Asuka she was the one who made her have to fight dirty to retain that NXT Women's Championship during their match, because Ember is just so damn good. History repeats itself for the Empress of Tomorrow. She takes an Eclipse from Moon for another super close 2. And when Ember sets up for the second, Asuka shields herself behind an official, just like she did at TakeOver. Moon dives with a crossbody and Asuka rolls through into the armbar. Moon is writhing in agony now. It almost seems like she's passed out from the pain, so the referee raises her arm, which catches in the air at the last moment. Moon then crawls one arm to the ropes to try and break the hold, but Asuka won't even let go as they stand up. Instead, she's trying to drag Moon back down into an Asuka lock. But Moon lets the momentum take her up and over backwards, rolling over Asuka until her shoulders are the ones that are down, forcing her to break the hold. And she sits up as Ember hits a quick drop kick to the back of the neck. Moon then rises to the top of the turnbuckle, hits the Eclipse as Asuka stands up, and 1, 2, 3, and new SmackDown Women's Champion, Ember Moon. But before Moon can fully celebrate, Asuka grabs her by the arm, spins her round to face her, and then the Empress of Tomorrow bows her head to the new champ and leaves her to celebrate. There's my booking. You like it? Yeah, you did. You like it more than Tempest's? Yeah, you did.
Well, that is the question. Did we like it more than we liked Tempest's version? Michael Oakley, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there were some points where I feel like Tempest's story was more linear, simple booking in a good way. And with this one, there's more twists and turns. What I really liked is Ember Moon coming in not 100%.
Yeah.
So it's even a bigger underdog babyface thing for her to try and overcome.
There are so many other factors involved. It did kind of coincide with the launch of The Man, with Ronda Rousey's return. It's really hard in terms of like making sure that that timeline still went. And that was one of our criticisms about Tempest, was that Ronda Rousey wasn't addressed at all. I love the fact that this booking means that we get Becky versus Ronda in the singles match that we all wanted.
Strong opinions.
Love that. Love that, but I do kind of feel like it was at the expense of the woman that this is meant to all be about, and a bit at the expense of Asuka.
Her relinquishing the title waters down the title reign, and then in turn the undefeated streak, and then in turn Ember Moon defeating her and ending the undefeated streak.
But is that the price you pay for keeping other people stronger than in Tempest's version?
That's it.
This sparks a lot more thought than Tempest, I think, in terms of where it could go.
While Tempest's version might be, as you say, in a linear way, a stronger story, does Laurie's version leave us with a stronger post-WrestleMania women's division overall?
It does.
I think it definitely does.
In a way, that's why with Tempest, I really wanted to know what happens next, because I think it's important, because he's left himself quite a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that the division is still strong, whereas the way Laurie built it, I don't necessarily need to know the next part. I don't know, I didn't feel like I needed it.
I'm still not sure which one's better than the other. I think we need to...
I'm on the fence here, actually.
Yeah, I think we need to get the answers from them to sway us.
Should we do it?
Yes,
All right, let's get Tempest and Laurie in here. Tempest, Laurie, thank you both for your submissions in terms of how you would book the ending of Asuka's streak. You both chose the same person to end the streak. Tempest, why Ember Moon?
I felt that Ember Moon would have been the person that would have benefited from it the most highly, that you could also then tie into the storyline and the history that they had going into a main roster run. I thought it meant the most to showcase something that we never got to see on the main roster, as well as someone that I think just narratively fit the best.
Laurie, is your
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, thanks for explaining my booking there, Tempest. Beating Asuka Street, being the one to finally finish that, is such a major deal. It's another accolade for somebody, and you should use it to build somebody else.
Okay. All right, so let's look at both of your scenarios in more detail. Tempest, we'll go to you first. The way Michael described it, a very linear story. Given how strongly Asuka is booked throughout, does it quite quickly become obvious that the only place this is going is WrestleMania, and therefore does that make the various title defenses in the 6 months up to WrestleMania foregone conclusions?
I mean, yeah, but I think that's a lot of wrestling. Someone is a dominant champion. I think it's more than likely that's going to culminate at WrestleMania. Asuka is really interested in the opponent that is Toni Storm, and she's just won a tournament, so hopefully that would be a big title defense also happening at a Big Four pay-per-view at Survivor Series. So you still have those moments, but I mean, yeah, everything's going to build to WrestleMania. I think that's...
Yeah, but isn't that your job as the booker? Your job as the booker for the next 5, 6, showcase matches, right, is to each time make the viewer believe, oh, maybe this is the time, maybe this isn't going to WrestleMania.
I think I'm more trying to focus on these as big storytelling moments. Like, I don't think a lot of people were anticipating, like, Roman Reigns losing the title to Kevin Owens this year at the Royal Rumble, but that was still something that was hotly anticipated because of the story that was involved. Everyone's still thinking that's going to be WrestleMania, but there are still elements in play there that you can use to benefit the story itself.
Mako, Mickey, Sasha, like a lot of really, really exciting matches that we're getting. With Ember saying after she's just won Money in the Bank, had this amazing moment, and straight away almost not burying herself a little bit, but knocking herself down by saying, no, I'm not ready. With her belittling herself like that, I was like, that's an interesting choice. To what detriment is that to the rest of the women if Asuka's running through them all and doesn't even care?
I think I was very much trying to walk the line between which women are going to be showcased in this story, which ones aren't. I felt like I covered enough of the roster there, so it's not as if nobody wants to face Asuka, because I would totally agree in that sense. If the entire roster was scared to face her, I do think that would be a big detriment to the roster, and then of course having people to face Ember after WrestleMania and such, while still also having the people like the Riot Squad and the Iconics who could take very dominant losses to also further develop the monstrous stature of Asuka as she moves into the later stages of the reign.
Interesting.
As for Ember Moon, though, to answer that part of your question as well, that to me was something that I just didn't have enough time to explain. That was some of the things that I would have
Blaming
loved to...
the parameters of the competition.
Yes,
again,
of course.
Yeah.
I would love to have like two running storylines here, but also for the sake of some suspense maybe of trying to be like, and then she comes out and challenges for WrestleMania, to have that be a part of the story, where I think coming after Money in the Bank with her acknowledging I'm not ready, I think that is more so just setting her aside from the rest of the women that are itching and clawing to be able to be the next one to face Asuka, where she's like, I acknowledge I'm not there yet, but I will be.
Okay.
Michael, you're looking pensive.
I do wonder about this Asuka title reign of you're naming a lot of her opponents, and they're interesting from a let me call myself a hardcore wrestling fan perspective. It starts with the big names, the horsewomen names. It starts big, but I feel like in terms of the big names that have been built on the main roster, it drops off. Are you mistaking good matches for big matches? Because yes, Toni Storm will be a big match, Meiko Satomura would be a big match, but they haven't been built on the main roster. Have you done enough to build them to be credible challengers the way Sasha, Bayley, and Charlotte are?
I think it's a valid criticism to say that maybe those aren't on the same level as the 4 horsewomen who have obviously spent years being top stars in WWE. In my version of this reality, I would like to think that the Mae Young Classic gets a lot of praise, gets a lot of attention put on it. Having 3 of the final 4 people in the semifinals and then finals of this tournament would hopefully be enough to make them, oh, these are credible challengers. They've just beaten, the field of 32 other competitors, and maybe not be on the same level as a Sasha Banks match or a Bayley match or something, but a serviceable level to go into a WrestleMania season.
Where's Ronda Rousey in all of this?
Ronda would be the Raw Women's Champion around this time. I was booking an Asuka storyline, and that didn't have to include Ronda Rousey. She's just occupied doing something else as the Raw Women's Champion.
Right. If you've gone through the 4 horsewomen, you're looking for challengers who, regardless of their talent, are big, credible in the eyes of the audience.
Are you robbing the fans of Asuka versus?
No, and I think that would be something you would do after this story, because at this point, Asuka and Ronda are both undefeated, and I wouldn't want to beat either person before WrestleMania, so I think the better option is to just not do it, and then give them the proper match later on in the story.
Okay, interesting. Laurie,
hello.
You've been sitting there for a while.
I
want to congratulate. I was saying to these guys, I want to congratulate you for how responsible you were in when fantasy booking, making sure that you haven't done too much to ruin the course of time.
I don't want to take the one thing that WWE did well away from them in 2018.
Yeah.
You don't want to take that off them. They did a good one.
Do you think that your version, by the time Asuka gets to WrestleMania, that she's as strong as she is in Tempest's version?
Potentially not. I don't think she maybe is. What I wanted to get to was a world in which we've got Asuka, we've got Ember Moon, we've got Ronda, we've got Becky, we've got Shayna on the up coming in, we've got Sasha and Bayley just turned heel, so we've got a really, really strong women's division.
Michael?
He's thinking. He's in a pensive mode.
Why would I care about Ember Moon beating Asuka for the undefeated streak when she's relinquished the title?
Asuka would have been forced to relinquish the title when she's gone for a bit, and then she comes back winning it and continues on a streak.
If I'm a casual fan that's watching WWE like casual fans do, and I know that Asuka's undefeated and she's the champion, and then she's not the champion anymore, I would assume that she would have lost her undefeated streak. What's the big accomplishment of defeating the undefeated streak and winning the title when it's a thing that she's lost in the past?
She's not lost it. She just had to vacate it for a minute.
It's lost.
Not
this
lost.
is semantics.
No, it's not lost. It's not. She was never pinned and she was never submitted, and you would promo package.
WWE Vacant will have had a new champion.
You would have.
That will have happened, which means it was lost.
You're going to promo package the absolute out of that to say that she's never been pinned and she's never been submitted. This is semantics. This is semantics.
Yeah,
and I think, and also, we're booking for dummies, but we do promos. We make sure that it's.
Did you hear that, people at home watching on YouTube? Man just called you dummies.
Well, fortunately, you're not voting, so.
You've kept the women's division very, very strong, but is that potentially at the expense of Asuka, which is the big debate for me that I think we're all still.
I think for me, the thing with undefeated streaks is like the best undefeated streaks in the history of wrestling are like, obviously you have Taker's streak at WrestleMania, right? But he was losing in between WrestleMania every single year. You've got Goldberg coming in and squashing people, and that number just inflated artificially every single week. Suddenly there's like 50 more opponents every single week he comes out.
That wasn't true.
No, it wasn't. I know.
Whatever the number was.
I think you should know this.
No, well, the number just started.
Yeah, but it's like that sort of thing of just like the kind of, the way that the sort of myth arises is more about, it's less about what actually happened in the ring and more about what you're telling people. And I think with Asuka, in terms of her undefeated streak, it's about it getting past a certain number of days, really. Once you've kind of done Becky, Charlotte, and Bayley, and Sasha, you've kind of crossed the people off the list that need to be done. And then like beating Carmella at this period in time is kind of meaningless.
So it doesn't matter.
I think in terms of the overall storytelling, when you're just saying somebody has been undefeated in WWE for 3 years, that's what people are listening to. They're not going, okay, well, tell me every single person.
All right.
And the injuries.
Okay.
Okay, that's your opinion.
I think Nina's done a very good job here of explaining where we are as a panel, what we see as the strengths and weaknesses of both of your scenarios. So now you're each going to get an opportunity to just give us your final pitch for why we should pick your version over your opponent's while keeping it to firmly under 1 minute. We'd appreciate it. Tempest, you first.
I think my booking does a better job of telling the story of Asuka's streak, and that being the main focus of the story, while also providing Asuka with a satisfying character arc, with her going through her battles with complacency and wanting to be challenged, and finally having that paid off in a WrestleMania match against somebody with plenty of history with, while also providing tons of great matches that, while yes, they all do lose to Asuka, and there are lots of people in the division that do lose, all service the story in individual ways.
I think my booking leaves the division feeling really strong. It leaves the future of WWE really, really bright for the women's side of things. It doesn't end up in a situation where what happened in 2019 is that Becky became Becky Two Belts and nobody else got a look in. We end up in a situation where we have Becky, we've got Ronda, we've got Asuka, we've got Shayna, we've got Ember, we've got all of these people in new, interesting scenarios, and you can ping off so many storylines out of that. We get a satisfying conclusion to the streak that plays on history, and we get to build new stars in the process.
I think we've heard plenty from both of you. In fact, I think a period of silence from both of you would be most welcome at this point, while Nina, Michael and I decide who we think should join Ollie in the final of Fantasy Booking Warfare. Decisions have been made. First of all, we are going to hear from Nina Samuels.
I ultimately went for the story that really told the story of Asuka, had the true character development, and paid that wonderful woman the respect that I think she deserves, and I went for Tempest.
All right. Michael Oku?
Well, I'm looking at it purely based on what is the best way to book an undefeated streak. It's very easy to do it, to book it well as it's happening. It's very difficult to book the ending. So I'm purely looking at the ending, and if it was built well, and that's why I'm choosing Tempest.
There's not much drama here because you're in the final. Congratulations, Tempest. You've already got 2 out of 3 votes. My main concern, though, was the thing about Ronda and why you weren't having them face each other. I thought the answer, Tempest, that you gave to that was exceptional. I vote for Tempest.
Outrageous. Do you know what? Having booked 2019, see where you end up. See where you end up. Fix it, Tempest, you ruined it.
At this point, we hear from both competitors. Let's hear from the loser.
We can't.
Laurie.
Well, I think he's already said his piece, to be honest.
Well, he stormed off. He stormed off in the most unprofessional manner, and that's not.
Let's hear from what I hope will be a more gracious winner than we had loser in Tempest.
I would say dock some points from him, but he didn't get any, so.
Wow.
Woo! Ollie, I'm coming for you, Mr. Davis. Only one of us can be the least terrible person at this game. It's gonna be me.
And in a completely one-sided affair, Tempest put Laurie Blake in the Asuka lock to steamroll his way into the final. Only one match remains, but will it be Tempest or Ollie Davis who stands triumphant as the least terrible booker of fantasy wrestling? Tune in next week, where they will be booking the Shield triple threat match only on Fantasy Booking Warfare.
I'm actually, do you know what I mean? I'm actually in a bit, sorry, I was a bit unprofessional, I'm actually a bit warm. So I'm just going to have to take my t-shirt off, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I appreciate it. Sorry, I appreciate it. Great.
Oh, well this changes everything. Wait, Nina Samuels is great, and
is great, and so is Dave.